Well, hi guys, Shanna Kramer here with Creatively Uncorked, bringing you this week's Creative Box Live painting, The Lonely Tulip. This is our challenging painting of the month for May 2021, and this is a painting in watercolor. We're focusing on watercolor this month, and the reason that this one is the most challenging is because of the light colored washes. We'll take a look at the full image here. With the light wash, what we're using is we'll cover the whole canvas, or I'm sorry, the whole paper, working with paper today, and we'll cover that with water and then do a wash of the entire background. So you can see we have the soft yellowy oranges and then the soft purples. And I do want to get that shadow in here on this first wash as well. So let's take a look at what we have here. I have the reference image kind of weirdly off in the bottom here because it's the only place it wasn't covering things. And I have my lovely four-legged assistant, Irie, helping me out today. So yeah, you can see her drinking the water. You can drink it now, but not after I paint in it. Also, we use non-toxic paints. So if you got your paint supplies from Creatively Uncorked, then they're non-toxic. Protect your furry friends and yourself if you drink your paint water. It happens. Alrighty, so today I've got four supplies. I have my paper. My paper is 140-pound Arches cold press. This is what we send out to you in your kits. I have it taped down on all four sides on a hardboard. You can tape it down to whatever you like. And with my roll of tape, I just put that right under the top edge of that board, and that'll help gravity to assist my painting. Over here, I've got my paints, and these are the ones that we sent out to you. If you are not using these, using your own paint, that's just fine. You can use any colors you like. This paint that we have here, this is just a Prang basic student set, so it really does work great, especially with this good paper. All right, so I've got my paints activated, and I activated the paints by using my mister bottle and just spraying the paints. And I did that about 10-15 minutes ago, so they should be good and active now. That should be one of the first things that you do when you're ready to start watercolor painting, is activate the paints that you're going to use. I also have a sponge, and the sponge, just like last week, we are going to be using the sponge to create our wash. I have my water here. I'll just give it a good dunk in the water, slightly squeeze it. We do happen to want a lot of water in here. And less cat hair. All right, so I'm just adding some water to the paper, a little bit more actually. And when you trace your image, be a little careful. I got mine a little too close to the top, I think. I mean, if you're freehanding it, you can make it any size you want, but if you're using the traceable that we sent you, yeah, just be a little careful. Maybe move it down a little bit more than you think. Okay, paper is wet. Take a look at how wet it is. You can see this water is pretty darn shiny, so that is very, very wet paper. Try to keep it even, and I have it here tilted up for gravity. Now, moving on, and you can use any brush you have. I'd say use your largest brush. If you have some kind of a mop brush that holds large quantities of water, use that. Otherwise, I think I'll just use my regular flat here. And I have a nice yellowy orange, so I'll take a little bit of orange and a lot of bit of yellow. And it's a very dark color right now, so you want this to be a tint. This is a background tint, so there we are. So since we already have water on the paper, this will be just fine. We can just, this will be nice and light. It'll be about half as dark as what you think it's going to be, and it'll lighten up after that. So I'm just going to go ahead and apply this orangey yellow color here in a big swishy wash in the background. You can do even stripes if you want. It'll mellow out. It'll calm down. But all right. So cleaning out the brush a little bit. Moving on to the next color, which is going to be my purple. So headed over here to the red violet. More water. And these really are lovely colors together. Very lovely. Purples and oranges. It's one of my favorite color combinations. Okay, and then down here we have the shadow. And if you look at the original, which is squished down here on the bottom of the screen, It's got a little blue, so I'll take some blue. Maybe a touch purple in that blue. Calm it down. Maybe a touch more purple. Okay, so now I have the blue, and this is where I'm starting my shadow. My shadow goes under the glass and off to the right. The shadow is kind of large. The reason that I wanted to do this now in the background is because now it's going to have soft edges, it's going to flow nicely, it's going to tie in well with the background. But you'll see what's happening here with the lines. I drew my lines extra dark so that they'd show up on camera. Come on, focus, focus. Anyway, you can see it. There you are. So you can see the lines around my shadow, which normally if I was just doing this as a painting, not as an instruction, I would not draw my lines that dark. So you can draw them as dark as you like. This, what I'm doing right now, is a pretty important step actually. I am just soaking up the water from right around the edge of the paper. There, because if that water runs under the tape and then it pulls back up onto the paper again, you'll get cauliflower edges, which if you intend to do cauliflower edges, that can be fun, but mostly it's not something that you're after. So just keep an eye on that while it's drying. Try not to get your paper towel onto the paper itself, otherwise you'll take up too much of the paint and that you may not want that. And I think I've got a lovely textural amount of cat hair in there as well, so thanks for your contribution, Irie. Okay, so what I'm going to do is let this dry. You could blow dry this right now if you wanted to. You certainly could blow dry it. I'm going to let this one dry naturally, so I'm going to stop the recording. Yes, I'm recording this today, and that's because of the dry time, because this will take about a half an hour to dry now. And that'll vary depending on your humidity and other factors. So I'm going to hit the pause button, let this one dry naturally, and that way the colors get a chance to flow and mingle a little bit more. And we'll come back and add a few more layers after that. Hey guys, welcome back. So we just took a short break to go ahead and let this painting dry, and it's been, I think, about half an hour for me, and it's not completely dry yet. When your paper is completely dry, assuming that you're using the Arches cold press 140 pound, you can see that it buckles when it's wet, and when it dries it will flatten back out again. As long as you make sure to keep it taped down firmly until it dries completely, it will flatten back out. Okay, and you can see mine is still buckled, and so the paper is still slightly damp, but I don't think it's going to cause any problems to go ahead and finish the painting at this point. So if you have a smaller brush, we want to get some details around our jar. Let's see, found my brush here. Yeah, this one will probably work. And you have one. You should have one that's about this size. Probably came with your set. And if you're going to continue doing watercolor, I do recommend you picking up a decent set of brushes. The ones that we sent you are fine, and they'll last a while, but they always wear out. And when the tip wears out, you need a new brush. So I'm getting to the point where these all need to be replaced. Another tip taking care of your watercolor brushes: don't use them for acrylic, and don't leave them in the water. I know with acrylic we tell you to leave them in the water, but with watercolor, don't do that. Give them a good swish, set them aside. Okay, onward. All right, so I have this jar, and this jar is going to be mostly blue. We'll flip over to the original here and take a look at that. So what we're looking at on the jar is we've got blue around the edges. We've got blue a little bit in the glass and at the bottom, and then we have the top rim. Looks like there's a little shadow on the curve of the jar at the top, so we'll make sure we get that in there to make it look a little bit more round. So when you're taking a look down here at the shadow of the jar, you can see that tulip itself is giving off a shadow. So we'll want to come back in and work on our shadow a little bit more. I think we're going to be okay doing this jar before we do the stem and leaf. That'll just blend in later. So I think we'll be just fine. Taking a look back over here at our painting, my slightly smaller brush, take a little bit of blue paint, and to me it seems like glass blue should be a little bit more turquoise than that. So I'll just take a little turquoise paint here. And I'm going to bring this paint around the edges and then soften it. So I'll just come along down here, and this you kind of have to do quickly because you don't want it to dry out. Okay, rinse the brush, dry the brush, and scribble the edge. That'll give us a nice soft edge, which is exactly what we want on the edge of a jar. All right, now leave that alone until it dries. Do as I say, not as I do. Okay, so there's one edge of the jar. And I'll come back up here too. I think the bottom of the jar would be a good place. And this time I'm kind of avoiding the area where that stem is, just because I have it sketched out. I know where it's going to be. Rinse the brush, dry the brush, and scribble out that edge. There, soften it up nicely. And don't want to make it too smooth, so you can see there are some reflections in here. So if you want to try and lift some of that color out, add water with your brush, a couple strokes of water, paper towel, and it lifted a little bit, but not as much as I hoped. That's okay. Moving on, so we're going to go ahead and add this top rim. So again, I'm taking a little bit more paint. I kind of like that greenish blue more than the blue. Mix them together. What the heck? Okay, so there's my color all mixed up. Right along the top of the jar, underneath that rim. Rinse the brush, dry the brush, scribble your edge. Keep right on going just like that. So I know we have the, let's flip back over here. Okay, so the top of the jar, the back of the jar, that's going to go kind of around the stem. Okay, got it. Switch back to the overhead view. All right, so I'm just going to keep on going here with my edges, just like I've been doing. So I add my color, rinse the brush, dry the brush, soften the edge. And as long as you're doing this part quickly enough, you should be just fine. There. Okay, let's get, we still have the top of that jar to do, and then we have a couple of shadow areas. And this blue of the jar is like the light's shining through it, so you're going to get the blue of the jar reflecting down here into the shadow as well as a shadow. So we have a nice variation of colors that are going to be popping up down in this shadow area. First, let's finish the jar. Okay, so now I'm doing the back of the jar, so I'm filling it in behind the leaf, behind the stem. Okay, and I think I'm going to, this should be a little bit darker, so I'm just going to take a little bit more solid blue and drop it in right along the top rim. All right, looks pretty good. And if your paint down here is still wet, you might want to just wait a little bit before adding the rest of the rim, because when wet paint touches wet paint, it's going to bleed. There. Try and keep my edges looking round here. All right, stop messing with that for a minute. So I can come in here and darken my edges, but I think my paper is just too wet right now, so I'll wait with that and move on to the flower itself. So I'll switch back to my slightly larger brush. Wait, is this the one I started with? Ah, take your bigger brush anyway. And we'll do one petal at a time here. So this is going to be mostly red. Just adding a little bit of red to the well. And we're going to also have a little bit of purple in there. There. So I have red and purple in the same well, and I'll just pick up whatever color I need to use as I need to use it. So these background petals are going to be fairly dark. So I'm just picking up some of the color from back here, combination of red and purple, and I'll do the backmost petal, which will be the darkest one. Just go ahead and fill that in. Soak up some of that color. I got a lot of paint on there, so I'll just try to pick up a little bit off the top edge. Maybe get a little variation. There. Now it's kind of a little bit faded, so it's a little lighter at the top than it is in the bottom. And we'll do that one more time. Let's see. We've got this area, this area, this area that we can't really paint right now because this area is wet. So we can come down here to these bigger petals and fill those in. So what I'm going to do here is just take a damp brush. Okay, all I did was swish out in the water, damp brush, and then I'm filling in this petal with water. All right, now that that's all filled in, I will come and take some red paint, just picking up that red with my brush, dropping it along the outside edge. And I might want it thicker than that, actually. And that will blend. And I'm going to also add a hint of purple down on one edge. Now when you're doing this technique, try to make sure you don't get too much water. Also tilting it up a little bit higher so that I get the water drip at the bottom, so then I can soak up that one drip of water. Gotta control those puddles. All right, so now I have a really light edge here, and I'm going to leave that alone. I like that. And then I have nice dark tones at the bottom, so that will stay as well. Now I'll move over to the left petal and do the same thing. Touch of water on the brush. Fill in the petal. And you can see my water's a little bit pink here. That's okay. All right, and then I'm going back to that thick red, just dropping that in around the petal, and a touch of purple at the bottom. Ooh, maybe not that much purple. Well, I don't mind it actually. I think it kind of looks okay. Blend it out a little maybe and add a little more of that darker purple to the other one. What the heck? It's good shadow color for a red flower. On my bottom edges, I'm going to try to be a little bit more careful about covering up those pencil lines. Okay, so now while that's drying, then I'll come back down here to the jar and add a few more touches to the jar. So rinse your brush well. Actually, I'm going to switch back to the smaller brush again. And use what you have for brushes, but it is very helpful to have a small pointy brush. All right, so now I'm going to fill in this rim a little bit more. One line under the rim that's going to kind of stay there and not go away. And then I've got one line right directly in the middle of that front rim. Not touching the edges because there's going to be a reflection there of white light, I guess. Just going to blur this only a little. Okay, well, a few more darker areas that we'll bring in. So we've got kind of some blotches down the side that are going to be reflections. So I'm just dropping down the color and then smudging it out. with water. So that's kind of a reflection on your glass, and that's something that you're always going to see. I'll take another little bit of blue here. This time I'm adding more blue than turquoise. And I'll have that around this edge as well, because when you're looking at a glass, you have the outside edge of the glass and you have the inside edge of the glass. So we're going to see that over here a little bit more prominently. And this is where that edge kind of meets up with the bottom. So dropping in some blue, rinse and dry the brush. This is a thirsty brush. And if you take a look at your Watercolor 101 video, we do talk about thirsty brushes in there and what they're good for and how to do that. So I'm taking a little more of this thick blue now. The blue around the rim is still damp. So when I drop a little bit of color in there, it's just going to blend. Okay, I added a little bit of blue there to the inside of the top of the jar. Just blending out those edges a touch. Just scribble them out. They don't have to be perfect. Just give them a good boop, boop, boop. A little bit of water. Okay, so what else we need in this jar? We'll need a darker rim along the back and along the bottom as well. So let's go to the bottom. This is just plain blue again, and I'm coming in here right under the jar. Watch this. There. So just a little touch of blue under the jar. Again, with the rinsing of the brush and the blending of the edge. Okay, now this one's going to work its way out into our shadow, so I'm gonna stop there, leave that alone, and so I can work on the full shadow all at once. All right, so I've got a little bit more blue that's going to come down in here. So I'm just placing the blue kind of where I want it, and then coming back in and scribbling out those edges. Just kind of tap, tap, tap with some water. The only thing you want to keep in mind here is the general shape of the jar. It still needs to look round. Do a big swipe right across here. Oh, more water. And that'll help. That's kind of our little bit of a shadow at the top of the jar. And if you're trying too hard to be perfect with this, stop. Don't do it. Just let it be messy and let it be. Let it live. Okay, drop in a couple of edges here. I feel like it needs to be a little bit darker yet, so I'll take some more of that blue right on the side of the jar. A little bit up to under that lip of the jar again. And this one is kind of where you're just adjusting it to your taste, to where you like it. There, a little darker there. And don't be afraid of getting this part, well, okay. I was going to say too dark, but actually that's kind of the point of this exercise, is to not get too dark. Right? I think I'm going to need a little bit of a darker color back there. How about purple? Maybe purple? Purple and teal mixed together there. Okay, so go right up the side of the jar. And where else? Maybe right down here on the edge of this, the bottom right edge of the jar as well. Oh, just drop in a little color. You know I like the color. Alrighty. Let's see, what else can we do? Maybe a hint of orange in there, huh? Oh, pretty. All right, the reason I'm doing this, color reflects color. We kind of talk about this week after week, I think. And so if you have colors somewhere on your painting, you have to use it somewhere else as well. Color doesn't exist only in one spot. That's where with watercolor, you can really, really tie the whole thing together with your background colors. So if you know that you're going to be using, for example, red, yellow, and blue on your painting, then you can do a wash in the background that is a lot of red, yellow, and blue. And that's going to help already tie your painting together. Okay, enough of that. I'm going to stop messing around with the jar. Let's see, is our flower dry enough yet? I think we can do these top 2 outside petals now. These are going to be lighter at the top, shadowier at the bottom. So I'm going to do a similar technique. Just fill this in with a little bit of water, not too much. You don't want that water to puddle. And I think I'll do them both at the same time. Okay. Now take a little bit of red, drop it into the center. I'm going to leave the top edge very light. There we go. And then I'll take a touch of purple. Just right down there at the bottom for the shadow. Control the blend. Okay, so I think that is all we can do on that flower for now, at least until it dries a little bit more. We have that one last petal, and then we can move on. So I think right now, probably the only part that we could paint is the shadow. We'll come back and do the stem and the leaf when the jar is dry. And yeah, let's go ahead and do that. So take a larger brush. Let's see, what do I have for a larger brush? Okay, here's the number 14 that you have in your art kits. I think this will be perfect. So what colors do we want in our shadow? We have the light coming through. So we're going to want a little bit of that teal and some of that blue, and that'll be coming down here. And let's see. Kind of looks like our light source is from here, but it's not. So we have our light source from here. It's coming down this way. And then I'll just add that little movement of the flower. So we've got that little bit of a stem that you can kind of see through the jar and coming up into the shadow. All right, first things first. You know how we did our full background wash at the beginning? Let's see if I can get rid of this for you. We're going to do something very similar to that right here. Here's the trick. When you're doing a second layer wash, you have to be careful about it. You put the water down and stop, okay? You can't keep going with it. You can't keep changing it because you'll lift up the paint from underneath. So I have a wet brush here, very wet brush. And you always, when you're doing a wash, you make the paper, the wet of the paper wider than the area you're going to cover. So I'm going outside of this shadow. And being sure to fill it all in with water with as few brush strokes as possible. Okay, so now onto that shadow. So I do want the reflection, so I'll take a little bit more turquoise, a bit more blue, so I want to have my reflection in there. I did a little of that purple as well. Ooh, keep it dark here. Let's keep this kind of darkish. And it'll be darker closer to the jar, and then it'll fade off as it goes to the edge. All right. So while that is blending and fading, and I am just tilting up my board here so that the water's running down this way. I want to add a couple of other colors in there. I know I'm going to have a little purple. I kind of want to add a little bit of orange. I'm just worried about it turning green. Well, I guess that's not the worst thing, is it? Maybe another little purple right over here. When working with watercolor, just go ahead and add your color. I mean, this is really truly, in my opinion anyway, the beauty of watercolor. It's all the fun colors blending. All right, I've got some colors there. Now I want to work with the stem. I know I don't have the stem here yet, but I can see where it's going to go in the shadow. And so I'll take a darker color. I'll just darken up my blues with some darker purple here. And so the stem is coming off of here, and then it goes like this. And then there's another leaf that goes like this. There, I'll make it connect there. And any other colors we think we want in that. What do you think? What's your favorite color today? Does your favorite color change day by day? Mine does. Don't want to go overboard with this. I just want to drop some color in and walk away. Quit painting. That's the hardest part. Yeah, I think a little more of that orange up there, especially toward the top. Ooh, I really like this reddish purple at the bottom though. Lovely. So just take a little bit more of that red violet, just kind of drop in some touches. All right, so you can see now that the paper is definitely starting to dry. The paint is not spreading as far as it once was. So that means it's time to stop. I can clean up that edge a little bit. And then I'm serious, stop. Quit. But playing with those colors, that's just the fun part. Yeah, all right, stop. Okay. Again, with the edges, you want to keep an eye on those edges. Keep soaking up that water with your paper towel. And now we're not going to be adding any more color into this. That shadow is just the shadow. It's done, and now it's going to dry. I kind of want to bring in a little bit more purple, though, into the jar itself. Just because there's so much purple in the shadow. So, again, back to the color reflecting color. There. So just enough of a purple shadow there on that jar to kind of tie those colors together. All right, onward. I think we're okay to do that last petal now. And this one will be red again, light at the top, dark at the bottom. So again, I'm just taking some water with my brush here. And this is my pointiest brush, so I can get those details. Oops. Don't stick your arm in the paint. Today, this week, is moving week for our West Fargo studio. It is end of May right now. Our lease is up at the end of May, and we're moving out. And this week is crunch week to get it all out of the studio. And I haven't been there a lot lately. I've been out sick, unfortunately. So now I got to do it all in 1 week. 7 years worth of stuff in that studio. So if you're local, looking for any extra art supplies or anything, chairs, tables, stop on by. Kitchen sink, bar fridge, beer fridge. Okay, a little more of that purple in the red. I want this, nope, not dark enough. There. Isn't that fun watching it blend? I'm going to let that be. That could end up being something really fun looking. I also want to kind of make sure it also still looks like a tulip, so don't let it go too wild. All right, so here would be a very good time to take a second break. I want to let this flower dry and I want to let this jar dry. The last thing that's being added here is the stem and this leaf, which will be green, a little bit of orange, maybe a little bit of red, and we'll pop that leaf and stem in there, but we have to wait for this to dry first. So patience, let's all take a break, and I'll see you soon. Okay, welcome back. We just took a brief break to let this painting dry, and I just took a hairdryer to mine this time just to dry it more quickly because I've got to get to work. All right, so it's looking pretty good. The last parts that we have that green stem. I think I want to do some touch-ups in that flower now. This backside turned out a little dark, and so I want to make some of this others blend in a little better. So I'm going to do another layer on the flower. First, though, let's do the stem. Always use the biggest brush you can. I think I'll go with this big giant brush. So for the stem, I'm going to take some light green, mix with a little orange, maybe a little more orange. All right, pretty thick. We'll see how it does. So I'm just starting up here at the top of that stem, or the petal, and press more firmly. You get a wide brush stroke. Lift up and you get a thin brush stroke. Okay, starting at the bottom again, I'm going up the stem right next to that petal. And maybe I'll start at the top. Okay. Couple of little touches right there at the top. Okay. I kind of feel like I want a little green reflection down in here. Right, so rinsing that brush and actually setting it aside because I want to work with a smaller brush this time. So I'm switching to a slightly smaller brush, and I want dark green now. So dark green, I'll just take, let's see, dark green. How about that? Touch of blue. There we are. There's our dark green. Touch of purple? Why not? Anytime you want to darken a green, red and purple are actually pretty good colors to do that with. All right, so now I have my shadow, and I want to do this before it dries, so I can blend along that petal and right along that stem, just a little. Okay, just a little touch of blending in there. And how does that look? Good? We okay with that? I think maybe a little more blue at the bottom of it, just so that it blends in with the glass a little bit. Just a touch. And what the heck, why not just smudge that color out a little? If you don't want your hard edges, and if you have a couple of like overly firm edges, just go ahead and just tap them with some clean water. It's better to do that while it's wet. Okay, so now I feel like I have a tulip sitting on the bottom there. Give it a little bit of a tilt. That's a little more defined. Okay, and that was just my dark shadow. So that was my dark little bit of green and the purple and the blue there. Okay, let's get back to that flower. All right, so my water is no longer clean. If at any point you feel like you want to stop, get clean water, by all means, you do that. I'm just going to keep right on going here. A lot of people too will just have 2 glasses of water. That way you can have one for rinsing your dirty brush and then another one for picking up clean water. And that's a fantastic idea. It really is. I used to do it all the time, but it's hard to remember because I paint with acrylic way more often than watercolor. And with acrylic, I only have the 1 cup, although 2 cups would work for that as well. Okay, getting that red paint, just dropping some blotches in. Just want to really punch up that color. Pow, pow, zap. All right, now we're getting bold. Now it's looking bright and happy. Might even bring a little of that red down the stem a little ways. Why the heck not, right? I like it when the colors blend together a little. There. All right, I think that is about where I'm going to leave it. Slight more divider right there. Round it up a little here. Okay, stopping. All right, so rinse your brushes, set them aside. When you're done with your watercolor brushes, you can wash them with soap and water if you want to. Not really necessary, just give them a good swish, make sure all the color is rinsed out, and then set them aside. And I know mine is still a little damp here, so you're not going to get the full finished effect, but so we've got that tulip, the green and the glass, and you can see that that glass is a little blotchy and it is a little colorful, and that's fine. That's actually fantastic. And then we've got the colorful nice shadow over there, which might be my favorite part. All right, now I know it's going to be very, very tempting to make your glass extremely smooth. And if that's your style, you go right ahead and do that. Maybe try it both ways. Leave it a little blotchier and see what it looks like. See if it looks any more natural that way. And try it the other way too. Try it by adding just a little bit of, trying to smooth it out a little more. I don't want to smooth it too much. I kind of like the color effect of the different colors in different places as opposed to being all blended together. Oops, good thing we waited. Look what's happening there on that flower. See how we're getting those cauliflower edges at the top 2 petals? Don't want that. So I have a thirsty brush and I'm just scribbling out the edges. Thirsty brush again is when you rinse your water, or rinse your brush, dry your brush, dry it a couple times so it's ready to soak up water. That makes it a thirsty brush. And then you can just blend those edges out. So there we go. I think we're going to call this right here. Yes, there will be an acrylic version of this painting on the website at some point in the future. Probably not going to happen this week since we're moving out of the studio this week. There just isn't time for it. So maybe next week I'll get caught up on the acrylic paintings. And here you are. Thanks for joining me for this Creative Box Live challenging painting. And I will see you next week.